All right, thank you for joining, everybody. I've been advised we can crack straight on. Welcome, Neil. Hello. I think
you.
what we'll do is we'll start with the name, rank, serial number. If you wouldn't mind telling us a little bit about yourself, your background, and a bit about British Showjumping.
Okay, so I've been with British Showjumping for about 18 years now, and I've been the IT manager for 16 of those years. I also look after another company, British Dressage, and yeah, and that's really
Thank you very
about it, really.
much. I know that obviously you've had your own journey to the cloud, and I guess we'll start at the beginning with what prompted you to consider that move to the cloud, and what were the main goals that you were looking for in that move?
Okay, so we have had on-premise servers. We were hosting everything on site. It was coming to the end of the cycle for that equipment. We'd already moved the website over to a hosted platform for scale availability, and it made sense to look at the cloud when we were going to change the hardware. Um, the options it offered us, scalability, availability, uh, and also business continuity. That was one of the big objectives, is the fact that we weren't relying on hosted platforms at our head office.
Yeah, yeah. And I guess what was the kind of process that you went through for migration in order to get from A to B? And were there any kind of challenges or surprises that you encountered as part of that?
Um, well, when we first looked at it, obviously we worked with yourselves, and um, we were looking for a solution that was giving us a lot more flexibility. Gave us scalability, availability, but mainly we wanted to transition away from being on site. Um, so the way we did it in phases. We did it in three phases. Firstly, we decided that actually moving straight to the cloud wasn't the option, because we weren't ready. We moved to a hybrid solution. We connected our cloud platform, which we chose for Azure. The reason we went for Azure was purely because we were already using Microsoft Office 365. We'd already moved the website there. It made natural choice to move to Azure. So we connected up the cloud, and we connected it to our local domain, and we moved services over gradually. So the first thing we did was we moved to an RDS server. We put that in the cloud. We migrated the users over. We then decided to move the centralized applications to a cloud. And then probably the hardest bit was moving files and folder shares, because users, as you all know, are all about habit. They know where everything is. It's a shortcut on a desktop. It's a link. So we decided that we would basically limit how and what they could access, rather than take the philosophy of Microsoft to access anything from anywhere and confuse them. So we moved all the directory shares that were on a server to a single document library on a SharePoint site, but we made it only accessible through the web page. The point was that they had a single point of access for that. And as they moved over and they got familiar with it, we decided to allow them access through mobile devices, through apps such as direct through the desktop apps. But the most important thing is that we phased it in a way that it didn't cause disruption, but also it allows users to embrace change. Because the one thing we found was, as you probably all know, users don't like change.
Oh yeah,
Don't.
oh yeah, yeah. I've certainly encountered that a lot myself. So that kind of starting simpler and then ramping up rather than just doing it all in one
Yeah.
huge big bang
Yeah.
brought some benefits.
Yeah. I mean, one of the things we did, I mean, it's like you were saying earlier about experience, then bring the technology. That's one of the phrases you use. So one of the things we used as a carrot and a stick to SharePoint was they could book the holiday online. They were like, wow, I don't have to email, I can check my holiday. And that brought them to the site. They then started to using the other features like meeting room booking, and we just developed the SharePoint site, and we expanded that, and people took it on board.
Yeah.
Because they could see the benefit of change.
See the benefit in one thing and then start to bring more.
Exactly. It was a very simple thing. They could just book it online, but they then used the online calendars. They used the meeting room booking, and we added features to it because then we found that doing it that way, it was a more focused approach. And also they found that users, they embraced it.
Yeah, I mean, that was going to be one of the next questions, really, was about how things have impacted day-to-day operations for yourself and for your members. And I guess it sounds like, to a certain extent, once you start the snowball rolling of you know, one thing being better, one thing being improved, you almost start to get that whole effect of, oh, well, why can't this other thing work like that? Why can't can that other thing be moved in?
Yeah, and it's like I say, one of the first things we did was we moved to an RDS server, which was a big change because, but from an IT perspective, it reduces support. It's a single entity. You haven't got 30, 40, 50 desktops that are all configured for that particular user. It's like now we have got to the point where we use Intune as well. So it's like we're about to replenish a lot of laptops. They literally enroll the device, they download an app, they log onto the desktop. And if you compare that to how it was before, we'd have to connect to a local domain, the device would have to be in the office. We could send out all around the country, we just send a laptop out, they have the instruction on how to actually join, they enroll, they download the client, they're away. It basically improves our business continuity to the point of we're not reliant on a physical location anymore. And as I say, the way we've changed the way that users operate, they now see the benefit. And also from ourselves, it's more beneficial from a company point of view.
Yeah, that's streamlined a lot of those operations.
Yeah.
One of the concerns that businesses have in general, but again in specifically going to the cloud, is around things like data security and privacy. What areas have you found have been challenging or beneficial in those areas around your move to the cloud?
The biggest problem we had to begin with was when we started opening up access to files, so that users can access their email on their personal phones. They can access. Well, we were like, we don't want that. We want that control. So basically, we put policies in place such as Intune. With Intune, we used mostly out-of-the-box policies, such as compliance policies. Devices have to meet a certain requirement. We know what devices are accessing it. We can restrict which users can enroll. I mean, from the security and governance, Azure has a lot of that built in. And we work with yourselves. Majority of the time, we use default policies that are on there that enable us to have a secure environment.
Were there any changes that you had to bring in around security that also caused headaches with users? I mean, I know that even sometimes stuff as simple as multi-factor, some people will come along and go, oh, I don't want to have to do that. You know, do you have to overcome anything there?
Okay, so the biggest change wasn't getting users to switch over to MFA. The big change was when they had to switch over, because they all chose text. It was changing it over to, you've got to use an app. You have to download an app. I have to read instructions from an IT email, and it's not. That was the biggest headache we found. But once, again, we did training sessions with them. We showed them how to do it. Because the other thing is, why do I have to put it on my own phone? Why do I have to use a personal device for my MFA? It's business. It's like, and the thing is big changes is that when Microsoft just suddenly changed things, you have to embrace it, and then you have to basically relay that into your user base without actually causing disruption. And as you probably know, the majority of the people that cause and don't read IT emails are usually higher up.
Yeah, of course. Yeah. Where do you see this going for the future? Are there any kind of further aspects on the roadmap for you, or any particular technologies coming up that you're looking towards?
So one of the things we did was, when we first moved, we moved to RDS. And one of the things with that was we found we had some issues with load and increasing the actual capacity of the server, which is obviously you can do within cloud computing, didn't really solve the problem. So we moved to AVD, and we now have multiple hosts, so we can control which, and we also have we have on a time scale, so it's only available between the hours of 7 and I think 6 o'clock. And then, like I say, we found that RDS didn't work, so we looked at alternatives, and AVD at the time met our needs. I mean, going forward, one of the things we're trying to do at the moment is move away from server-hosted applications or server-hosted services, and just move them as a service, a hosted service. And we're in the process of doing that. We've already started to move over to using web apps instead of having a website hosted on a server. It's a lot easier to control resources. You can change service plans. You can have service plans that are utilised across sites. It's a lot more flexible. And it's just moving away to the point of having servers, because yes, we used to have them hosted, but we're still using the same technology. It's still a server. Yeah,
you're still getting the capabilities you need and the end user experience.
And it's also separating resources. We're finding now that actually moving away from a shared SQL server to using Azure database allows us to less. So, for example, one of the things we used to have an application running service reports, kill the database server, and that impacts on other applications. So that's one of the big things we're looking at the moment, is moving away from. And as I say, the majority, and also the thing is, what we found with Azure is that there is new technologies, new features, new functionality coming along all the time that you can quite easily tap into, and it's very easy to get into, basically.
One aspect of moving to the cloud that is fairly universal for a lot of people is the shift from CapEx expenditure over to a more OpEx model. Yeah. Has that been beneficial? And I guess that's not just your field. That would be speaking to how, does the FD like it? Does everybody love that approach? Or
yes and no. It is one of the biggest challenges we've found, is that change from, you say, this we want a budget for this year. It's a set cost, and once you have the outlay, moving to a service where it's based on usage, and that figure can change from month to month very quickly. You've got to be able to manage it. We use a visual cost analysis tool via Probrand, and it helps us identify where costs are spiraling, where costs are increasing, and it also allows us to manage our costs. I mean, we had an issue when we first moved over, moving over to web apps, and our costs went up, I think 20% from one month to another, and we couldn't figure it out. And we worked with yourselves, didn't we? And it conspired that one of our developers took up on himself to increase one of the service plans without actually realising how much that new service plan cost. So it's very easy to spend money in a cloud, and this applies. We use AWS as well. It's exactly the same. It is very easy for costs to spiral. You've got to manage your costs and analyse. For example, it was only the other day, we were trying to scale back a SQL server. We moved it down to a different price point, and actually the price went up because of the way the actual database was being used. But actually we were able to, within hours, see where we are. We've got alerts on costs. You can also do that, which is quite useful. So when certain services go up, we can put alerts on it.
Yeah. So I guess having that kind of cost management aspect,
absolutely.
And
it's
having
essential.
The reporting, alerting, being able to visualize that. And of course, if anybody comes along and says, well, why did it cost this much? You've got the ability to report on that.
Yeah, I mean the thing from management is that we're allowed, it gives us the ability to show them where the cost is going. We can give it a granular breakdown. They can actually see where. And also, we found that having that information allows us to tailor the resources that we're using. For example, one of the things we've done recently is a couple of the VMs that we've been using, we've downscaled the spec because we're not using the capacity, thus reducing the actual costs of it. So it allows us to actually change and adapt based on what we actually use quite quickly.
So that flexibility is bringing benefit, because that's obviously like the flip side of the coin, is that you've got the variability in costs, but you also have the flexibility in being able to change configs when you need to.
It's. I would say that cloud computing is costing wise, it is not cheaper than on-premise. It is not, but it does offer you a lot more. If your business changes, you can adapt quickly, and you can adapt cost effectively. You don't have to. And also, you'll find as well on a lot of it, they advise you, say, well, actually, you're not using this processing power. You could actually downscale, or you can tap into the information of what's actually happening. You can report back and say, well, actually, this is the reason we need this.
Yeah, because I mean, especially with certain aspects of IT, when you're delivering things like through RDS, you're now doing it through AVD, but in the past it was very much a case of, right, we want to consolidate all of this resource requirement into a centralized set of servers. But you then had to kind of try and figure out what resources would be required. And you don't want to undersize it, because then it's going to go slow and people complain. But if you oversize it, well, then you know that you've ended up spending, that you can't just get that money back. You can't downscale later. You've spent the money. Whereas with cloud, it's a case of, if you've overscaled, doesn't matter. You'll see that and you can scale it down.
It's like AVD. We provide, so all of our user base have a remote desktop, use AVD. Okay? And we put in a timescale of, I think, 7 to 6, I said earlier. But what we found is that some users wanted to work at 8, 9 o'clock. So we, instead of putting all the hosts live to that time point, we basically put one server to that point. We changed the timescale on one server. So yes, only a few users could access it, but it met the needs of the users wanting to work later hours, but without having to put everything live and costing a lot more. So you can adapt and change quite quickly. It's
Now, you mentioned also that you're looking to move more of your services away from the kind of infrastructure as a service over to the software as a service. Are you anticipating that will bring cost benefits as well? Because I know that with a lot of the kind of infrastructure as a service, it's usage-based billing, whereas with software as a service, a lot of the time it tends to be more per user billing. It's a seat-based approach.
and it's also, so for example, one of the things is that we're running SQL Server. Well, our actual version of SQL Server needs upgrading. Well, you take away that element and all the headache that changing such an important part of your infrastructure. But also what we find is that we can look at the cost analysis, we can look at the service plans. One of the web apps we were using, we dropped the service plan. We weren't using all of it. So we've actually reduced costs. But it's also, one of the reasons we want to move away from that is that you have servers that host multiple things, multiple applications, and they impact one knocks the other one out, or etc. So it's moving away from that as well. And we think from a cost perspective, we can make it more efficient and be more effective. And the other thing as well is our business works in spikes. So we have high seasons, we have low seasons. And for example, one of our web portals is certain times of the year. For example, now we've got a big show we just had a big show last week at the NEC. Massive spike. So that web app needs upgrading just for that period.
Yeah.
It just needs that scalability. We don't need the scalability where we use, but we can just upgrade it for a week, very cost-effective way of, and also we are still providing the level of service with increased users.
Just on a slightly different aspect of this, has your move to the cloud taken away any of those kind of headaches that sometimes keep IT managers awake at night, like what happens if the server breaks down, or what happens if there's a fire, or things like that?
Yeah, it's changed our DR plan. Our DR plan has completely changed. Our business continuity has now changed. Whereas before we had a plan, it's like, okay, we restore this to the server. We've got, I mean, at one point I remember we used to have, I think it was yourself, we have a list of equipment we need to buy. We literally say, right, okay, we need to order this equipment today. And that's how it works. One of the biggest headaches is availability. We can move very quickly. I mean, we had an issue with Microsoft once, where there was an issue with Microsoft had migrated our tenant to another data center, and it hadn't. There was an issue, and it knocked out one of our web services. So all we did was we literally changed region, and within 5-10 minutes we were back operational. So it gave, and it was working with them to identify. They couldn't identify the issue at the time, but we actually got around the problem. And also it reduces costs. We used to have dual two lines into the building. We only have one. We literally have one. If there's a problem now, we just send people home.
Yeah.
We've got to a point where now everyone has a laptop, everything is remote, and if they haven't, they can go home and they can basically enroll their personal device, and log on and access their remote desktop.
Yeah, and I think that was going to be another thing that I was going to ask about. I mean, I'm not sure what profile of work style do your staff generally operate within? Is it sort of mostly working from home, office, hybrid?
We have a hybrid solution at the moment. So we work 3 days in the office, 2 days, and that will change on a rota. And one of the things we're doing at the moment is, we talked to a couple of providers today, is we're making the office just non-generic. No one has a desk as such. Yes, they sit there, but it's not personalised. It's not a phone. It's literally a workstation. They've got monitors. Plug the laptop in. And we've got to a point now where our business continuity plan is very straightforward, and also it's very easy for users and new users to understand and access.
Okay. And just one final question, might be a slight curveball, but are there any kind of demands that come down from management or from other aspects of the business that you've found that cloud has either made it easier or more challenging to address, depending on what those requests are?
I would say access. The access, and this is not moving to Azure, this is mainly Office 365, it's access to information. They find that actually having it in the cloud, whether it could be anything, but the point is we use Office 365, they can access that, they can share that data, they can collaborate with third parties. And what we found is that we've met most of those needs, and if they do ask for something, we can give it pretty quickly.
Yeah.
I mean, for example, one of the things we're working on at the moment is a new test. We've got a CRM, and we've got a bespoke CRM, and we just want to test something very quickly in an environment. We can spin up a new server, and we can give that access quickly to our developers and see. And what we find as well is that actually they really want to make sure that things don't go down.
Yeah,
and this is the thing. The worst thing is for us is that if someone tells me, if my CEO tells me the website's down, and I don't, and they know it before me, that's not
good. Yeah. You want to be able to get that up and running. Right. Well, thank you very much.
That's okay.
For your time and for your insights here. That has been very useful. I don't know if we're doing a Q&A for this as well, or Has anybody got any questions that they'd like to ask of us at this stage? Again, you can come and find me later on if you need to. I've got one more tech surgery I'm doing this afternoon. If you'd like one, you've probably got a chance to squeeze in. Otherwise, come and find me floating around near the Probrand stand. I'll be available if you do have any further questions. But in the meantime, thank you very much for joining us, and enjoy the rest of your day. Thank you, Neil.
Thank you.